all you cool cats and kittens.
And you eukaryotic,
multicellular,
Heterotrophic,
organic,
living organisms.
Welcome to the BSHS Bio-Besties TED Ed video. I'm your host, Coach Dunn, along with
Miss Keelen,
Miss Bryant.
On today's segment, we take a closer look at viruses and bacteria.
We figured you guys were a little bored with only having one teacher in all of this online learning, so we thought we'd bring you three, with an unlimited supply of nerdy tidbits and bad puns.
a dash of awkwardness,
And semi-funny jokes.
Semi-funny jokes? You must mean hilarious.
So before we get started, make sure that you have something to write with and a piece of paper.
This will allow you to write down some notes. Highly encouraged as we chat with you about the fascinating and evolving world of viruses and bacteria.
Also, keep an eye out for the code words. Make sure you write down the word and the timestamp. You'll need these code words later.
So, are y'all ready to buckle your seatbelts and take this wild ride?
Yep.
Let's get started.
A few weeks ago, we covered classification. Hopefully you remember that classification is the way that we classify things or group them together. And if you look at the graphic organizer, you see orange circles on the diagram. We have 3 domains.
And from those 3 domains, you can see the 6 yellow bubbles. These are our 6 kingdoms of life. All life fits into one of those 6 kingdoms. So as long as something is living, it will fit in one of those 6 kingdoms.
Yep, that includes you.
Who else does that include?
Your mom.
On the left side of the diagram, we have our prokaryotes, and eukaryotes are on the right.
I know you've probably slept since we first covered pro versus eu, but we have to remember the differences between them. The easiest characteristic to remember is prokaryotes do not have a nucleus.
This is why we say pro is no.
Exactly. Pro is no. Now, eukaryotic cells have a true nucleus, are more complex, and are larger in size, as well as embryos.
Embryos is short for membrane-bound organelles, like the nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, just to name a few.
So basically, you are a you.
Yes, you are a eukaryote. Who else is a eukaryote?
Your mom.
Yes, your mom, and all animals, plants, protists, and fungi.
Why do you invite a mushroom to a party?
Yes, why?
Because he's a fun guy.
Let's look further into prokaryotes. As you can see, we classify prokaryotes into 2 different kingdoms. On the left of the diagram is the first kingdom, eubacteria. The reason why we have to separate prokaryotes into 2 kingdoms is because eubacteria have cell walls with peptidoglycan.
Try saying that word 5 times fast.
So in eubacteria, these are the common bacteria that you've heard of before. These bacteria are found in soil and act as decomposers.
Decomposers break down dead or decaying organisms and return nutrients and organic material to the soil.
Also, these are the bacteria that interact with us every day. They live in our intestines, they help us make food, and they also can make us sick. The archaebacteria make up the second kingdom and are separated from eubacteria because they have cell walls without peptidoglycan. These are bacteria that we,
As humans,
yes, as humans, that we don't really come into contact with in our everyday lives. They like harsh
Or extreme.
environments. So they live in places like thick mud, animal digestive tracts, salty lakes, and hot springs.
Check out this picture. Is this not the coolest thing?
oh,
That is really cool.
This is a picture of a deep sea hydrothermal vent.
This is a perfect example of where we would find archaebacteria that could withstand extremely high temperatures.
something else that is interesting and important to remember about bacteria is
Or prokaryotes if you're fancy.
they're categorized based on 3 different shapes. Let's take a look at them.
The first shape is coccus. This bacteria shape is round or circular. Probably more spherical, but I like to think of C for circle. Next, we have bacillus. Now this one is shaped like a cylinder or a rod. And lastly, we have spirillus. Think of a spiral or a twisting ribbon.
Some may even think of the shape of our DNA molecule.
Exactly. I've got an idea.
What is it?
Let's look at a real-life picture of these 3 bacteria shapes as if we were looking into a microscope. Again, we start off with coccus. You can see that they are in pairs, chains, or clusters and have the round spherical shape.
Next, we have bacillus. This picture's a little hard to tell, but if you're able to zoom in, you can see that they're rod or cylinder shaped.
Then we have spirillus, and I like to think of the shape as a wavy string.
If you were in class, I would pose the question, based on what you just learned about the 3 shapes, what shape would we be looking at? Bacillus. Hopefully you answered bacillus because you can see that the bacteria is rod or cylinder shaped.
And if you notice at the top left, it says code word. This is the first one, so make sure you write the word and the timestamp down.
You'll need that for later.
Make sure you check your spelling.
Hey, let's review the structure of prokaryotes.
Ooh, good idea.
When we study the structure of prokaryotes,
First, we've got to remember that they are really small and simple.
yes.
That's a fact.
So when we look at the structure or the parts that make up a prokaryote, there are 8 parts that we would like you to know.
Which sounds like a lot.
But it's really not because you have a jump start when it comes down to labeling or identifying the parts.
Yep. By now, you should know the big 4 characteristics that all cells have.
They are highlighted in yellow.
So, the big 4 are the cell membrane.
Which can sometimes be called the plasma membrane.
Yep. And remember that the cell membrane is what allows certain things to come in and out of the cell. Then we have ribosomes, which are responsible for making proteins, followed by the cytoplasm, which is the jelly-like substance that surrounds the inside of the cell. And last but not least, DNA.
Don't forget that DNA can also be referred to as genetic information, genetic material.
Now for the 4 new parts. I'm sure we recognize the cell wall and that it is on the outside of the bacteria. It provides shape, structure, and protects the cell from its environment. Now, this is an example of a eubacteria because we can see that the cell wall has peptidoglycan. We also see flagellum, which are the string-like structures that help the cell move.
Like a propeller.
Then, lastly, we have the cilia. They look like little finger projections or tiny hairs and also help the cell move.
Early in the video, Ms. Keelen mentioned that bacteria can cause disease. Here are some common examples of bacterial diseases. This is definitely something you need to be jotting down on your paper.
Tooth decay. So this is why it is important for you to brush your teeth. We have bacteria in our mouth, and that bacteria is helpful because it helps aid in digestion of our food, but these bacteria also love sugar.
Same, girl, same. I love me some sugar.
Yeah, what she said.
So, like all of us, bacteria love sugar, and it causes these bacteria to create acid, and that acid is what breaks down our tooth enamel and causes cavities.
P.S. That bacteria can also cause bad breath.
So by practicing good dental hygiene, you can prevent tooth decay.
Lyme disease is caused by deer ticks. So when you are camping, hiking, or outdoors in wooded areas, be sure to tuck your pants into your boots and practice other safety measures to prevent those ticks.
Let's talk tetanus. You may have heard of tetanus or maybe even received a tetanus shot if you had a deep cut or even stepped on a rusty nail. You received your first tetanus vaccination.
That's just a scientific term for the shot that you get at the doctor.
As an infant. It is recommended to get a tetanus booster every 10 years. If you think you have been exposed to tetanus bacteria, they will give you a tetanus booster as a preventative.
On to tuberculosis. In the U.S., we typically do not vaccinate for this unless you are vacationing out of the country. If you work in the medical field where you interact with a lot of patients, you may be required to receive a skin test to test for tuberculosis or may receive a TB vaccine as a precaution. Tuberculosis is a disease that can cause serious lung damage. The good news is that there are treatments available.
Okay, on to salmonella bacteria. If you ingest contaminated water or food, such as raw or undercooked chicken, you may get salmonella bacteria food poisoning.
Speaking of salmonella, you may have heard that raw eggs carry salmonella. Inside of the egg can carry salmonella, but interestingly, the eggshell can also carry salmonella because of feces
Poop!
from the chicken.
E. coli bacteria is a common good bacteria found in our digestive system. It is usually deemed harmless and can actually help us stay healthy and help us to digest our foods.
However, E. coli bacteria can also cause food poisoning as a result of drinking or eating contaminated water or food, such as eating raw or undercooked beef. It can also be on veggies and in some dairy products. You may have heard of recalls on romaine lettuce due to E. coli contamination.
Wait, can't you get sick from not washing your hands after handling and touching those really adorable baby turtles?
Wow. It is so cute. So cute.
Turtle fun fact, yes, you can get sick, so wash your hands.
Let's also remember that bacteria are not all bad. They are quite useful as well. Bacteria are known to help train our immune system, are used in food, and can also be used as flavoring in our foods.
Wait, did you say food?
Yeah, she did. Bacteria are used as an ingredient in many foods, such as dairy products like cheese and yogurt, and also bread.
Don't forget fermentation.
Fermentation is a process that bacteria undergo when oxygen is not available. So yes, bacteria help make foods such as sourdough bread, Swiss cheese, and even beer.
Now, let's talk pneumonia. Not to be confused with ammonia, which is a chemical.
The scientific name of pneumonia is Streptococcus pneumoniae.
Ooh, let's stop for a second and talk about that. As you notice, the scientific names listed here are written correctly because, number one, the genus names are capitalized, and number two, their species name is written lowercase.
And number three, they are italicized or can be underlined if the name is handwritten.
So these scientific names listed here are written correctly.
Also, we can review what we have learned about the shapes of bacteria because we see the root coccus in the scientific names for tooth decay and pneumonia.
So I am sure every student has been exposed to strep throat and even had to take medicine after you tested positive for strep.
Talk about terrible. The strep test is when they stick that long stick down your throat and swab you for strep.
That medicine you were prescribed to kill the strep bacteria in your throat was called an antibiotic.
That is code word number 2. You still have 2 more code words coming up, so stay tuned.
Make sure you write it down along with the timestamp.
If you remember that the word bio means living, antibiotic means against living microorganisms like bacteria. Antibiotics work because bacteria have cell walls made of peptidoglycan, and the antibiotics target the cell wall by breaking it down, which will then kill the bacteria.
Fun fact, there was a guy that accidentally discovered penicillin, which was the first antibiotic.
Why, yes, his name was Alexander Fleming. Alexander Fleming discovered the natural antibiotic penicillin completely by chance. In 1928, he was working as a professor at a medical school in London when he returned to his messy lab after summer vacation. He found mold growing in his bacteria samples. He was stunned to find out the mold had killed his bacteria. Therefore, he discovered, accidentally of course, the world's first bacteria killer, known today as penicillin.
He won the Nobel Prize in 1945 for his contributions to medicine.
Warning! Warning! Warning!
Warning! Warning! The following images may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's so weird that the same bacteria that are common everywhere are also the same bacteria that gives you things like strep throat, tooth decay, tuberculosis, and impetigo.
And don't forget that super weird one, bacteria.
She actually means necrotizing fasciitis.
So, to wrap things up on bacteria, let's review what we've learned.
Bacteria are unicellular and are also prokaryotic.
Bacteria are living organisms that can grow, reproduce, and carry out respiration.
Speaking of growth, bacteria grow so rapidly. Check out this clip.
Bacteria reproduce very simply and rapidly by doubling their contents and splitting in two. Just one bacterium, dividing every 20 minutes, could produce nearly 5,000 billion bacteria in one day.
Whoa.
Whoa.
5,000 billion?
They also have a cell wall, and the cell wall of eubacteria is composed of peptidoglycan.
And we heard about some really weird diseases that are caused by bacteria, such as strep throat, pneumonia, E. coli, and salmonella.
So brush your teeth to prevent tooth decay, cavities, and bad breath.
Wash your hands.
And if you're preparing food, do not cross-contaminate.
Which means to clean or wipe down anything that has touched raw meat, which includes your hands, to avoid the transfer of bacteria from one thing to the next.
And when eating or cooking fruits and veggies, be sure to wash them prior to consuming.
Don't forget, bacteria can be good for us,
but can be harmful and cause diseases too.
One last note. Weirdly enough, bacteria are everywhere and all over us. Do y'all know how much bacteria is actually on us? So much so, some scientists say we're only 1 to 10% human and 90 to 99% bacteria.
I know you guys think of yourself as humans, and this is sort of how I think of you. And so this man is supposed to represent a generic human being, and all of the circles in that man are all of the cells that make up your body. So there's about 1 trillion human cells that make each one of us who we are and able to do all the things that we do. But you have 10 trillion bacterial cells in you or on you at any moment in your life. So 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells on a human being. And so of course it's the DNA that counts. So here's all the A, T, G's, and C's that make up your genetic code and give you all your charming characteristics. So you have about 30,000 genes. Well, it turns out you have 100 times more bacterial genes playing a role in you or on you all of your life. And so at the best, you're 10% human. We're more likely about 1% human, depending on which of these metrics you like. So I know you think of yourself as human beings, but I think of you as 90 or 99% bacterial. And these bacteria are not passive riders. These are incredibly important. They keep us alive. They cover us in an invisible body armor that keeps environmental insults out so that we stay healthy. They digest our food. They make our vitamins. They actually educate your immune system to keep bad microbes out. So they do all these amazing things that help us and are vital for keeping us alive. And they never get any press for that. But they get a lot of press because they do a lot of terrible things as well. So there's
Now on to viruses.
When we were reviewing bacteria, you were shown this graphic organizer. If you notice, viruses are nowhere to be found.
Truth, because viruses are non-living.
AKA, sometimes they are known to be on the edge of life.
Viruses are non-living because they do not meet all of the requirements of living things. They cannot reproduce on their own. They need a host cell. Viruses do not grow and develop, and they cannot obtain and use energy. And they do not respond to their environment.
So when it is said that viruses are on the edge of life, it is because they do not meet all of the characteristics of life. For example, they can still mutate or change over time. They also share something else with us. They have DNA or RNA.
That's genetic material. Here's some common structures of viruses. As you can see, this is a T4 bacteriophage, tobacco mosaic virus, and influenza.
That's a science word for flu.
There are two basic components to remember when we study the structure of viruses. They have DNA or RNA, which is the squiggly stuff that looks like worms, and they have a capsid or protein coat, which protects the virus's genetic material.
Common examples of viral diseases are chickenpox, hepatitis, mumps, rabies, and West Nile.
And don't forget smallpox. Smallpox is an example of why vaccines are extremely important. Since the discovery and use of the smallpox vaccine, this disease has been eradicated.
This means that it was eliminated worldwide.
Due to the success of this vaccine, the smallpox vaccine has not been administered to the public since 1972.
Fun fact, the smallpox vaccine was the first successful vaccine to be developed. It was introduced by Edward Jenner.
Story time, children. In the 1700s, when smallpox was a widespread, world-feared disease, Edward Jenner noticed that milkmaids who contracted cowpox did not get infected with smallpox. So, to help decrease infection, Jenner transferred cowpox by scraping an infected individual and transferring that disease to another individual.
Fun fact, his trial subject was an 8-year-old boy named James Pips.
That's right. Then he tried to infect the same individual with smallpox. Amazingly, the individual did not get sick from smallpox because their immune system had already built up immunity.
Therefore, he discovered a vaccination for smallpox and saved many lives. So just remember, antibiotics cannot be used to treat or kill viral infections.
So wait, if I have a cold, antibiotics won't help me? Not even Tylenol will cure me?
Right. Remember, antibiotics work by breaking down the peptidoglycan cell wall of bacteria. If you think back to the structure of viruses, viruses do not have a cell wall. This means that antibiotics would have no effect on viruses.
Oh, I see. So what about that pink bubblegum stuff I took in the 90s?
Based on my semi-professional pharmaceutical background, that liquid pink bubblegum stuff that we took when we were kids was indeed an antibiotic called amoxicillin. Or maybe you've had penicillin. However, maybe you or someone you know is allergic to penicillin. It may be recommended that you try another type of antibiotic that is not in the psyllin family. Lastly, just because acetaminophen may sound like it's an antibiotic, it's just a scientific name for Tylenol.
Coronavirus!
So we cannot go on without talking about SARS-CoV-2, aka COVID-19, or the coronavirus. All jokes aside, we are not panicked. However, we do want you to know.
Wash your hands and follow the direction of state and local authorities as they study the data and the science behind their regulations.
Try not to buy into the pandemonium. And tell Karen to quit hoarding the toilet paper.
Please. Lastly, we personally choose spiritual faith and scientific knowledge over faith.
It may seem scary to think of a new disease emerging, but remember what you have learned. Use scientific knowledge, good judgment, and recommended guidelines to keep you safe.
We are scientifically hopeful for a vaccine for COVID-19 to bring us back to a sense of normalcy.
Talking about vaccines, but we haven't really mentioned what they do or how they work. So vaccines are used to prevent infection or lessen their effects if we do get sick with that virus. So what we do is we take a weakened virus or parts of that virus that we want to protect ourselves against, and we're going to inject that into our body. And this allows our immune system to create antibodies to recognize that virus if we ever come in contact with it again. So basically what vaccines are doing is preparing our immune system.
Don't forget, these viruses can change or evolve even though they are considered non-living. Think evolution. And this is the reason why we have seasonal flu shots every year.
While we are still talking viruses, there are viruses that are transmitted by mosquito bites, like West Nile and Zika.
Others are transmitted through blood and other bodily fluids like HIV/AIDS and Ebola.
Wow, that was a wild ride.
Yeah, it was.
That was a lot of information.
Let's recap what we learned about viruses. Viruses are non-living.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Non-living. That is your last code word.
Please note the last code word and the timestamp.
Newsflash, there were only 3 code words.
Ha!
Yeah.
Got 'em.
Again, viruses are non-living. They do not move, grow, or carry out respiration.
And don't forget, viruses are like little hijackers, and they take over and must have a host cell to invade.
Well, guys and gals, this officially brings us to the end.
Again, we've covered a ton of information.
Information that is important to remember, especially during this time. Please rewatch this video if necessary, and be sure to answer your questions and insert your code words as part of your assignment for this week's assignments.
Make sure you subscribe to your teacher's YouTube channel.
Like the video and leave a comment.
We hope that you enjoyed watching this video as much as we enjoyed making it. So that's it for the Bio-Besties, and in the words of our favorite pair of amoebas,
Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters.
And we remind you to stay curious.